if you spend a year getting coffee with somebody and really getting to know somebody, and every time you get coffee with them, you're like, yeah, I'm just in the studio working on some new songs. Eventually, they'll say, hey, I want to hear what you work on. And then you show it to them. What you've accomplished in that process, it may not even been your intent, is benefit of the doubt. And benefit of the doubt is the most beautiful thing in the world. If someone consumes your work while giving you benefit of the doubt, they see every single second of it differently. I think we live in too much of a society that wants TikTok to make us famous overnight without actually establishing the foundations of benefit of the doubt to come with relationships. And that's why, certainly people have gotten richer and more famous in the amount of time than I have. And they have built things far bigger than I could ever imagine in the amount of time I've been working on this. But the thing that will feed me when I'm 70 is that I can still text John McClane and tell him I love him. And that matters to me.
Hello and welcome to Quick Before You Forget, a personal growth and development podcast aimed at empowering people to build their unreal life from the ground up using tools like music, mindset, and movement to remember who they are while they build who they become. And today I am so excited to have Jason Fitz with me. He is someone who's built a life following curiosity instead of a straight line. Jason started as a classically trained violinist, studying at Juilliard, went on to tour the world as a working musician with gold and platinum records, and somehow followed that thread all the way to national sports media, most recently with Yahoo Sports. At his core, though, Fitz is a connector between music and sports, fans and stories, and who we were with who we are meant to be. Jason, welcome to Quick Before You Forget.
Look, that intro gave me goosebumps. I really appreciate that. That's kind, and thanks. I'm glad we get to hang out and get to talk a little bit. And it's really cool that you're doing something like this because I think so many people get lost in the process and get lost in where they want to be, and it's such a hard world to figure out how to find joy in all of it. So I'm excited to hang out and talk to you.
Thank you. That means the world to me. I really appreciate it, but also that really grounds me because it all comes from gratitude for me. And the first group of guests that I'm fortunate and blessed enough to have, like yourself, I think of as friends and people who have in some way influenced my life for the better. So this conversation, this podcast is a thank you note to you and to anybody listening for being here and being part of my story. So I'm just so grateful, honestly.
It's incredible. It's kind of you to say.
I mean every word. So I think about a lot. It's interesting to me your story. Like your story is one of the most interesting and fascinating not straight line careers that I've ever gotten the opportunity to hear. And I want you to walk us through as best you can and take your time. Take a couple minutes and walk us through kind of like past, present, and future Jason. Like how did you get to be now the, commentator for Yahoo Sports, but like how did you get there?
So it's crazy because my life, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I don't think I would know how to describe where I am today. I started playing the violin when I was 4, and that was because my mom wanted to take piano lessons. We lived in Vegas as a kid, and we lived next door to a piano player that had played for Elvis back in the day. So my mom got a piano, and he came over to the house to teach her. And my parents they love music, but they have no musical inclination at all. They're essentially tone deaf. And so my mom would try and play the piano and was awful at it. And after he left for the lessons in the house, I would crawl up on the bench and just by ear, I would play like I saw it, I heard it, I recognized it. So they took me as a really little kid, 4 years old, to UNLV to see if they had any piano teachers, and they didn't. They only had violin teachers available. So they said, "Hey, let's start him on violin, Suzuki. Let's start him for 6 months, and then when we have a teacher, we can move him over to piano." Well, that was the whole plan, right? But I was a stubborn kid, even as a 4-year-old, amazingly. So I got the Suzuki book, and this is, I think, I tell this story because it's indicative of who I am. I got the book, and you're supposed to go through it in 6 months. We were a year and a half in book 1. Like, I was the worst little violinist you've ever seen in your life. My teachers were begging me, "Please, God, let's go to piano." But I was like, "No, I wanna figure this out. Like, this is a puzzle, and I'm gonna figure this puzzle out." So it took me a year and a half to get through book 1, and then I got through books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the next 6 months. Once it clicked for me, and it became life. So by the time I was 8 years old, there was a retired teacher that had taught at the Royal Conservatory of Music. He taught in Las Vegas. He didn't really teach; he was just retired. But through one of the Suzuki teachers, I got the connection. He started teaching me. I was practicing 8 hours a day by the time I was 8. While I went to public school, I got up early enough that I practiced for hours beforehand. I went to school. I came home. I watched Transformers for 30 minutes. Then I did my homework, and then I practiced until I got my 8 in. And that was life for me in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So, played Carnegie Hall when I was 10, got into Juilliard prep when I was 10. Like, that was all like, there was this massive trajectory for me all of a sudden where I mean, it's all I did. All I did was play the violin. But the weird side story to this is that my dad, a big Raiders fan, on Sundays, dad loved to watch football. So on Sundays, he didn't want to listen to a cat die, is what he said when I was little. So he'd go get a dozen donuts, and we would split a dozen donuts. We'd just sit on the couch, me and dad watching football. And that connective sort of relaxation for me is something that was a common thread through my whole life. Sports were my disconnect. I didn't have to worry about anything when I was accomplishing. And there's a very famous violinist, Itzhak Perlman, that we all looked up to. Is arguably the greatest of his lifetime. And Perlman, I saw something or read something as a kid where he talked about how he loved to mute sports and practice because if he could watch something while he was practicing fundamentals, it would make him better. So I started doing that. So sports were always sort of ingrained in my life. I was just a violin nerd doing it the whole time. So, the funny thing is I didn't grow up around country music. Like my family didn't like country music. I didn't like country music. But you flash forward to later in life, in high school, I sang with some buddies. We got signed to a record deal. We were going to be the White Boys to Men, like in DC. Like everybody thought we were going to do this pop R&B project. We got dropped almost immediately. But at that point, we were all listening to like Garth Brooks and Tim McGraw. It was the mid 90s. We were all right in that. So we moved to Nashville right out. I was a year out of high school. So I was a year into college. We moved to Nashville. We all dropped out. We moved to Nashville. Didn't know a soul. The four of us just moved to Nashville, started singing on mails for people. We just tried to sing in front of anyone. We sang a cappella. We kept getting record deals and kept losing record deals. I played in the symphony. I played in studio orchestras while I was trying to make a little bit of money. But like I had no idea I was going to end up a fiddle player. It wasn't until that band was going to hire a fiddle player that I was like, well, we can't afford to pay another musician on stage. I'll just play fiddle. Fiddle and violin are the same instrument. It's just the approach. But I'd spent my whole life playing by ear. And so even though I obviously I could read music, I would get recordings of classical pieces as a kid and I would go to sleep with them. I listened to like everything for me was oral. So I listened over and over and over again. And so for me, all right, the concept of ripping things apart and approaching it from a fiddle standpoint was actually pretty easy. So you flash forward, that changed that most violinists, because this is, all the way up to the 2000s, musicians were very stuck on, I'm not a fiddle player, I'm a violinist. Like that was real for me as a kid. I didn't care. I just wanted to be able to support myself. Right. So I just started playing fiddle and playing fiddle with the band I was in. That led me to playing fiddle for other people. That led me to the band Perry, which is where I had my most notable success. I became the fiddle player and band leader, musical director for the band Perry, right as If I Die Young came out, right as it became the number one song in the world. And, when I joined the band, we had 12 feet of stage in front of Luke Bryan and Tim McGraw on tour, and nobody knew the song. Within a year, we were playing Dick Clark's New Year's Eve, and we were playing Hyde Park in London for 100,000 people. Like, we toured the world. And so I worked my whole life to finally make it in music. And then there was this moment for me where I made it. And I think what I thought was by making it, even if I wasn't getting rich, I was on TV. I was doing okay. I was keeping my lights on. I'm on massive records. I'm really blessed in my life to have 10 or so of these plaques that are hang up around my house that are all for different projects I played on. Tim McGraw, Matchbox 20, Michael W. Smith, all sorts of, massive projects. I was making it. and it just didn't feed my soul. And
Mm.
so the transformative moment in my life was when I sat down with, somebody that had helped me, been an entertainment attorney for me for years, had helped me know me forever. And I said, man, I don't love what I do. Like, I'm thankful for what I do. And like, I can't believe I get to play in front of 20,000 people every night, but it doesn't move my soul. Like, I text everybody, time to make the donuts before a show. Like, I just didn't have this rush from performing. And he said, if I asked 100 of your friends what you really care about, what would the answer be? And I said, sports. He's like, all right, figure out how to talk about sports. And this is the thing that I think everybody should hear from somebody in their life. I'm lucky I heard it. I said, well, nobody's going to take me seriously. I'm a fiddle player. Who the hell wants to listen to a fiddle player that's 5'9" that can't even palm a girl's basketball? I got tiny baby hands. I'm not an athlete. Nobody's going to want to listen to my takes. And he said, I'll never forget this. When you've been wildly successful at something, in perception, like when people look at it and think you've been wildly successful, you will get the benefit of the doubt on the next thing you do, no matter what it was. So pick wisely, but give your all to it, and you'll be fine, because everybody will look at it and say, well, God, if he's given up this music thing, he must be great at this. And by God, he was 100% right. Like, I started a podcast before there were podcasts. It was late 2012. I did my first ever podcast. These didn't exist. I sat in my car because I felt like an idiot with a microphone in front of me. And I did 10 minutes that I put on Facebook at the time where I just ranted. And I got a handful of comments that were like, oh my God, this is like sitting next to you on the bus. It's all you ever talk about. It's really good. For me, that was the rush that I didn't get from 20,000 screaming fans. Like, I think it was because it was later in my life. I was accomplishing this on my own. It was a new thing. It just fed my soul. So I ripped it apart. I listened to every sports talk programming thing I could listen to differently. I charted it. What do people do? How do they do it? What are their breaks like? How are performances done? I charted it like it was a piece of music. And I figured out that, the first break is 12 minutes into every sports talk radio show you listen to. I figured out, the interview is always the third block. I figured all of these things out because I just listened to a bunch of it. And then I launched a real official podcast. Again, this is probably 2013. I launched a podcast, and I'm telling you, the craziest thing is, like, I remember I got to one point where I had 40,000 listens in one episode because I had Sting, the pro wrestler, on to an episode, and then I had like Shefty, Fall Out Boy, and Charlie Daniels all in the. I was everywhere we were going on tour. I was carrying a little thing with me, and I would make friends. And my whole thing wasn't, "Well, I don't want you to come on my podcast because you want to come on my podcast. I just want to be friends with you." And then eventually, what I found is, like, people would be friends, and they'd say, "Hey, I see you tweet about your podcast. Like, you want me to come on?" I never asked anybody. They volunteered. That's how I always did it. So I had this episode, 40,000 listens. We were in Europe somewhere on tour. I screamed into my mic the next week. I didn't do any interviews because I was like, I got 40,000 listens. They're all going to stick with me. That next week, I had 12 listens. Not 12,000, 12. And the funniest thing to me is everybody I was on the road with made fun of me. Everybody I was on the road with told me I was an idiot. They're like, why? I get emotional. Ha! What's that? Belief. Everybody kept saying, why? What? Mm. Why do you waste the time? And to this day, I remember so distinctly saying, I don't need 40,000 listens. I need one. Sorry. Sorry, Ty.
This is not a moment to apologize.
I've told this story a million times. Never gotten emotional. Anyway, one. I need one listen. And that's crazy thing. Kept saying, I don't need 40,000 listens. I need one listen. I need one person they can change my life to hear this. And that's honestly what happened. So the funny thing is, as I pull myself together and gather my composure, like I've never told this story, God, the funny thing is, through Twitter at the time, you could talk to anybody. And I did that. I talked to everybody. I helped anybody I could. And there was a musician that had hit me up and said, hey, I want advice on how to make it. I gave him some advice because we're a village. We all help each other. And it turns out he had a cousin that introduced himself to me on Twitter, and he said, "Man, I work at ESPN. I'd be happy to listen to your pod." So I was like, "Oh my God, yes, listen, please." Sent me 3 pages, 3 typed pages of notes of, "Here are all the things you're not doing right." I was like, "Okay." Hunkered down in the lab, went to work. So a week later, I DM him and I say, "Hey man, can I email you this week's pod?" And he said, "Sure." He called me right after and he said, I've never had anybody take every note. I sat there. I pieced together the show with I'm a musician. You tell me what to do, I do it. Like the Juilliard in me is like, you tell me how to do something, I do it, right? So I think for me, it was this charging moment. And he came back and he said, look, I think you're really good at this. I think you'd have a future at this. So the number of people along the way, once I started building something, the number of people that weren't in music, that were in sports or in broadcasting that kept saying, wait, you're really good at this. I think you could do this was empowering to me. So I just kept going and going. And my goal was never to get listens. My goal was to get better. Every single show you get 1% better every day. If you get 1% better, eventually I'll look at it like and say, hey, I got the best friends in the world out of this. I met people in cool walks of life. I got better at this and I'm proud of the work that I did. As long as I could say that, I don't really give a damn about the rest. And so what's crazy is that, then all of a sudden, every time we would come up to the East Coast with the band, I'd fly out a couple days early on my dime. And I would just happen to be around ESPN and I go meet with people. And so that's the way that people started to hear my voice. And, the funny part about that is one day I was walking through the cafeteria at ESPN before I ever worked there. And there's Adam Schefter, who'd been on my pod a couple of times and we became texting buddies. He's sitting with one of the bosses. He immediately knows me and says, oh my God, what are you doing here? So I tell him, hey, I'm just taking a couple of meetings trying to get people to care. All of the bricks that you stack when you're building, if you build it the right way, if you build with relationships in mind instead of the end goal, if you build with the process in mind, then I think the house comes together. So for me, that all happened. 2016, I got a random call, and it was from a small division of ESPN, ESPNU in Charlotte, doesn't even really exist anymore. And they said, "How are you on college football?" I said, "I'm great." And they said, "Can you fly to Charlotte tomorrow?" I had a day off with the band. I did. I met with everybody. Before you know it, they offered me 1 day a week on what's called a usage deal in the entertainment business, which means you can get fired after one show if you suck. They offered me a usage deal for $1,000 a show. And I tell everybody the number on this because I think it's important. It was $1,000 a show. The max I was going to make was $10,000. That was it. And so I went to the band and said, hey, I need Mondays off. And they said yes. And 2 weeks before the first show, they changed their mind. They just weren't comfortable with me not being available in case there were shows or whatever else. They changed their mind. So I quit with no idea. The max I was going to make was 12 grand. But you're like, I mean, my whole thing is if ESPN offers you a show with no camera test, like I didn't do any of the normal things. If I say no, they're never going to call me again. They're just going to say, okay, you thought you wanted to make the jump. So I made the jump. And amazingly, a week after I made the jump, after I told people I was making the jump, a small station in ESPN radio in Nashville, a small broadcast station, their tiny station, had a morning show that was going to have a co-host opening, and I knew the co-host. So they asked if I could come in and do an hour of mock radio with them, and I did. They offered me the job for $24,000 a year to do 4 hours of radio every single morning, and I had to go to every Preds game at night, and I had to do public appearances in the meantime. So I started from that point on. Like I left the band late August of 2016. My last show was the Alaska State Fair. And 2 days later, I made my debut on ESPN, had never been on TV before as a broadcaster. And that same week, I made my radio debut, had never done 4 hours of radio. And I looked at all of it and said, I'll figure out how to keep my lights on. I'll take a second job if I have to at Starbucks while nobody's looking. And I did. I made the leap with no idea if I was gonna keep my lights on, and thank God ESPN loved me, and so before you know it, I was doing fill-in radio for ESPN at night, sleeping on a couch in the studio because it was too far from my house, then doing the 4 hours of morning radio, then going home for the day to try and recalibrate before I had to go back for Preds practice, and it's the hardest I've ever worked in my life for no money, essentially, while I just hoped ESPN would give me a shot for more. And by January 2018, ESPN moved me to Connecticut and gave me full-time shows. I helped launch SportsCenter on Snapchat. I had a daily radio show on ESPN for several years. I hosted College Football Live every day for the company. I got to do Game Day. I got to do Mike and Mike. I got to every major brand in sports at ESPN. I debated on First Take. I did all of it, and they changed my life. ESPN took the risk. They took the chance on me. They changed my life, and that eventually I was one of the cuts at ESPN a couple of years ago, but to that end, worst day you could imagine wasn't for me. To that end, I looked at it and said, my God, I got to work at ESPN. And an hour after the New York Times put my name in the paper that I'd been cut, Yahoo Sports called and said, if you want to work, we want you to work for me. So I've been at Yahoo. It's just been the most transcendent thing in my life. This is a very long story to tell everybody that A, you got to bet on yourself. B, recklessly bet on yourself. I believe that. And C, they say in sports all the time and in music, don't fall in love with the result, fall in love with the process. That is what has fed my entire journey. So it's been the wildest life ever. I've worked my ass off for pennies for most of it, but I wouldn't change any of that because I got what I wanted, which was the chance to make an impact. That's all I ever wanted. So I'm very blessed for it. And sorry I got so emotional. I don't know why it hit me today.
Never apologize for that. That is very welcome. This is a safe space, and I am actually very grateful that you let it out because truly it's important for people to know the breaking point there was belief. And that is a scary thing for people. That is where people get where fear can take over. And I know because of research that I've done that chemically fear and excitement is the same chemical in your brain, and it's how we process that chemical that determines what happens next. So, the fact that you had that feeling and emotion around belief in yourself and knowing and trusting and having that curiosity kind of lead the way this whole time. And you said something else that was really powerful about, just having one listen, just having one person listen, and I was listening, and I was leaning in, and you were preaching to my soul. So never ever apologize for having emotions, especially here, but especially in the world, because people need to know how real and this was and how visceral that experience is, and choosing to believe in yourself is not an easy thing at all. So you had a lot there to unpack, and I'm so grateful for the takeaways there at the end. But one of the things that came into my mind when I was thinking about like what am I curious about in this story was it sounds like you had to double down on believing in yourself. And I want to know how you worked through that, like how you listened to that calling, because a lot of people have it, right? Like a lot of people have that feeling, but they don't know what to do that. Like what do they do next, or how do they follow it, and how do they work through that fear and that find that self-belief?
I think the funniest thing is that people forget their why. And for me, I get asked a lot about how to make it in the music business. And I used to talk to when I toured with Game Day for I say toured, when I traveled with Game Day at ESPN, I talked to all the music schools along the way, and everybody had the same question, like, how do I make it? How do I get a record deal? How do I get famous? I think the lie most people tell themselves is the why. And by that I mean like whatever your why is, when I talk to kids that want to make it music, I tell them it's got to be your drug. The why is got to be your drug because the difficulty in the path will knock you out every single way. Like you will lose the discipline every single day. I had an agent that I really genuinely trusted as a person. About 6 months before I made it at ESPN, that literally on the phone with me said, "Why would anybody hire you to talk about sports when there are 1,000 people out there that have been doing it their whole lives grinding to get there?" I understand that logic. And for me, I hung up the phone and I was like, all I learned that that person was not my camp, and that's
Mhm.
okay. Like, there are people whose music I don't particularly enjoy, but they're wildly successful, and that doesn't mean that they're wrong or that I'm wrong. It just means that, like, you gotta find your why and your camp and people that believe in your why. My why was always consistent, no matter music or sports. My why was to be part of a moment. Like, I remember the first time I was in the car and I heard Guns N' Roses' November Rain. Very weird reference, but I remember looking at my mom saying, "That's awesome. I wanna do that. I wanna play on a song like that." And my mom at the time, I was a Juilliard kid. My mom was like, "That's so far beneath you. You're going to be a classical, soloist that tours the world. You're going to be the next TikTok pro." Like, my mom thought that was all beneath me. Funny thing is, I think in her mind, she wanted fame for me, and I never cared about, like, I don't care if anybody knows who I am. I wanted somebody to have a visceral feeling when they heard something, and that's why, weirdly, like, for everything that the band Perry did, like, there's a Tim McGraw song called "If You're Reading This," that I was the violinist on, that was recorded live at the ACM Awards. It became a massive number one for Tim. That meant something to me because it meant something to Tim and to everybody that heard that, right? Like Matchbox 20, the Mad Season record, I'm in the orchestra on that. It's somewhere in this room is the platinums for that. Like for me, that I got the platinum record for that because that was my November Rain moment. Like there's a bunch of people that don't even know that I'm on it, but when it comes on on the radio and I hear a song, I have pride for it because I was part of a moment. And, playing If I Die Young every night was yeah, there were the number of times I didn't wanna go out on stage because you're tired. Our busiest year, we were gone 300 days to play 225 shows. Like, I was exhausted, and I always remembered my first concert, which was Bon Jovi Skid Row, and I remember Richie Sambora blowing up on stage in what I now know is called a toaster, and he lands, and there's smoke everywhere, and he plays his ass off, and I was this little kid on my dad's shoulder. I thought my dad was smoking really funny, smelling cigarettes. I'm old enough to know now what it was, and I'm watching this concert, and it was so cool. It made a moment in my life, and so, for me, when I didn't want to play If I Die Young, which was more often than any touring musician wants to admit, I would think, "Man, there's some ten-year-old kid out here that this is his first concert, her first concert." Like, that's what it's really about. Even going into sports, I remember sitting up late to try and watch the George Michael Sports Machine because I wanted to see Raiders highlights, and they were hard to find when I was a kid. Or Chris Berman, and listening to him talk about the way he says the Raider. Like, there's this whole phenomenon for me where so much of my joy in fandom was celebrated with particular personalities. I didn't get into sports because I wanted to be famous. I got into sports because I wanted to share fandom with fans all over the world. So my why has always been impact. And when you know your why, without question, when no matter what, when your mission statement in life, when your why is easily defined, it's so much easier to fight through the doubt. Because if it is not clearly defined, if it's not your drug, if your why doesn't define everything that you do, then the minute you hit a brick wall, you'll find an easier path. And sorry I'm so long-winded, but I will tell everybody when I was as broke as I've ever been, so broke in music that I couldn't literally needed help buying dog food, right? I had no money. I got offered a gig playing for Dierks Bentley, who's a huge country music superstar. But Dirks wanted a bluegrass fiddle player that could do bluegrass acoustic. I'm not a bluegrass player. It's not what I'm good at. And I turned it down. And I remember everybody looked at me at the time and said, "Why? It's a salaried gig and you can't eat right now. Why would you turn it down?" And I said, "Because I know I won't be the best version of myself if I take it. So I'll make money, but will I be the best version of myself that helps the rest of my why? Will it help me get where I want to be? Does it stick to my business plan?" The answer to that is no. And ironically to me, the person that took that gig created an opening on another gig that introduced I took the gig that he was coming from, which no one had any way of knowing, and that's where I reconnected with the drummer of the band Perry, who I'd known for 15 years. I never would have gotten to the band Perry if I hadn't turned down the very gig that I needed because I needed the money. But the money wasn't my why. And if the money, it's okay to admit that if the money is your why, then let it be your why and embrace it. Don't let anybody call you out for that. But for me, it wasn't. So it's funny to me that sticking to my why is the thing that got me to the band Perry, which got me the platform to then have a podcast, which allowed me to meet the people. Like, everything in my life changed because I didn't do the thing everybody else told me I should do. I listened to my why.
You listen to your heart. Like it sounds, and honestly, that is powerful and it can be it's still scary for people because, when you can't keep the lights on and you can't feed your dog, those are very real problems to have, but it means something to have listened to your heart. And I just have so much respect for that because it's hard out there to try to forge your own way and to follow, you're a naturally curious human. So I feel like that could work very hardly against you if you're not careful, but you've been careful because you've been grounded in that why. So that's so powerful. And I just need to shout that out because goodness gracious, we could all use more of that. One of the things that you talked through in a lot of the story that you've shared so far involves a lot of people and connection to people. And that is something that's very strong in my heart because I feel like every single human I meet, there's a reason. And I'm wondering because you've had such unique journey with so many interesting people, what one relationship really transformed your life and made you better?
Uh, Man, that's a brilliant question because there's a bunch of them, and it's hard for me to credit any one. I will say to your point, and I never cared about needing anything from anyone. I don't care about needing anything from anyone. I connect with people because I hope to connect people to other people. And that's always been, even now, in the number of times that I'll have somebody hit me up for they want something in sports, but they're a music guy. Well, yes, I'm Dan Orlovsky loves going to concerts. The number of times Dan has hit me up and said, "Hey, do you know anybody in this camp?" Yes, I do, Dan. And the reason I'm going to introduce everybody is not because I want something, it's because I realize that by Dan getting what he wants out of this and this person who loves Dan Orlovsky on ESPN getting what they want, they're all served. And that to me is like that's more powerful than anything you can get. So like I say humbly, I think my biggest strength in my life is my phone book, and that's something that I treat with a ton of honor. I there's a couple of big answers, but I'll go to one person particularly, John McClain, who's somebody many people have never heard of, but he's a sports writer in Houston, a legendary sports writer, Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. He's just a great human being. And it was John that when we played the Houston Rodeo years ago, he was in Houston, and I'd listen to him on the radio all the time in Nashville. He did a weekly hit in Nashville where he talked about all teams, not just Nashville sports. So I used to sit in my car, even if I was in the driveway, just to listen to John do his radio hit because it was so interesting. And I was a massive fan. So when we played the Houston Rodeo, I found his email and I emailed him and said, "Look, I just want to say thank you for being amazing for all these years. I'm leaving you 2 tickets to the Houston Rodeo. If you happen to like country music, I would love for you to come out to the show as my guest." John responded to my shock and said, "I don't like country music at all, and I'm busy today, but this means a lot to me, so we should connect sometime." So I kept in touch with John and we exchanged information. Well, over the course of a couple of years, it was John. He goes out every year for the Final Four with his wife out to Vegas, and that's right around the time. Used to be around the time the ACM Awards were in Vegas, Academy of Country Music Awards. So every year I found myself out there. Every year, John and I would get lunch. We became incredible friends, and so we'd known each other for a minute. And John was the first person that ever. We were sitting at lunch, and he said, "Hey, I." You hurt my feelings a little bit as a friend." And I was like, "Okay, I take that very seriously. So what did I do?" And he said, "I see you talk all the time on social about your podcast, but you've never asked me to be on." And I said, "John, I didn't ask you because I don't want you to think that the reason that I reached out is because I want something." And he said, "Well, I'd love to come on your podcast anytime." So, peek behind the curtain. What I always did was created my own playlist. So I would do interviews whenever I could during the week, and I would just pop them into a playlist. And when I needed, I put shows up every week, no matter where we were for several years. And so I would then just be able to do a quick monologue and drag and drop. So I was in some random arena and I had everything set up. And I prepped for a day to talk to John McClain because he's a legend in football. We did the interview. He hung up and he called me back 5 minutes later and he said, "Hey, you're really talented. And so I want to help you. So my phone book is your phone book." So again, weirdly emotional, funny. Um, a transcendent moment because John has changed a lot of lives. I don't think he even realizes he changed mine. But what he did is he gave me 4 or 5 phone numbers, and he did the introduction. And we're talking Adam Schefter, Peter King, legends in sports. And so like if I had called Adam Schefter out of the blue and said, "Shefty, come on my show." Not a chance in hell, especially because back then people didn't even know what podcasts were. I had to explain, no, it's not a radio show. It's a podcast. I can tape it anytime. They had no idea. So John doing that was the opening for me that changed my life. And so to think that someone who gets hit up all the time to be a mentor and someone that truly does, like he gave me so much advice when I got on radio full time, to think that somebody that has had that level of success and has that many people that just constantly want little bites of his apple, he took the time to make 3 or 4 introductions that quite literally just they changed my entire trajectory. People would never have taken me seriously in this jump back then if it wasn't for John McClain. So I think John's belief is incredible. John's friendship is even more incredible. So, like I just think to your point in how you build everything, if you build things the right way, the number of people that will want to help you, like that's the biggest thing that I think people forget. I always tell people, like, if you walk up to someone back when they had CDs, if you walked up to someone and said, "Here's my CD, I want you to listen to my music." Let me tell you, as someone that has gotten that CD, the first thought is you suck. Like, there's just no way that people think that you're going to be good at this. If you spend a year getting coffee with somebody and really getting to know somebody, and every time you get coffee with them, you're like, "Yeah, I'm just in the studio working on some new songs." Eventually they'll say, "Hey, I want to hear what you work on. And then you show it to them. What you've accomplished in that process, it may not even been your intent, is benefit of the doubt. And benefit of the doubt is the most beautiful thing in the world. If someone consumes your work while giving you benefit of the doubt, they see every single second of it differently. I think we live in too much of a society that wants TikTok to make us famous overnight without actually establishing the foundations of benefit of the doubt to come with relationships. And that's why, certainly people have gotten richer and more famous in the amount of time than I have. And they have built things far bigger than I could ever imagine in the amount of time I've been working on this. But the thing that will feed me when I'm 70 is that I can still text John McClane and tell him I love him. And that matters to me.
You know, it reminds me of a story. Actually, I have this book and I don't know if I can grab it without wrecking my headphones. Hold on. So I have this book by Bobby Herrera. And the very first story in this book is, and I'm fortunate enough to have a signed copy, but the very first story in this book is a story about the bus. And when he and his brother Ed were 17 years old, how they were on a team, a basketball team in high school, and their mom would pack them a bag lunch because they didn't have the money to go to have, like, the celebratory basketball team dinner. So, the team would get off the bus after the game and go have the dinner, and these 2 boys would stay in and eat their burritos that their mom packed for them. Well, one time, Mr. Teague, his coach, came back on the bus, and he and I get I this makes me emotional, so we're just an emotional group here.
That's good.
So he gets back I get gets back on the bus and says, "It would make me so happy to get you guys dinner tonight." And the thing that really mattered to Bobby in that moment was that he felt seen. Somebody made him feel seen when he felt invisible. And that right there is the power of story, and that right there is what happened with you and, Mr. McLean, because it's he made you feel seen, and he gave you a chance when you didn't even really know that you were looking for it. And what a gift that is. And I would encourage anybody that's had I really hope that as you listen to Jason's story, as you hear Bobby's story, I hope that you maybe have somebody in mind that has been a transition figure in your own life at this level. Give them a call. Shoot them a thank you note. Let them know the impact that they've had on you, because I think that the most beautiful thing about what Jason shared was, he's so grateful for Mr. McLean and everything that the changes and everything that happened after that whole chance that he was given, and we all have people like that in our lives, and a lot of times we don't think to tell them. So it's cool when I had to share that story because you said you can still call him and say that you care about him and that you appreciate him, and what a gift that is, because I think he may appreciate it more than you know.
I
So
think there's also an element of, to your point, and it's beautifully made by you, but remembering that for every person that's out there that's helped you, you can also be that for somebody else. And I think we forget that, like, rich is a relative term. And I remind people of this all the time because constantly it feels like as a society, we're looking for somebody with more to help us as the way we're wired. But as I've said to people all the time, my busiest time at ESPN, I was averaging 70 to 80 hours a week on campus. I mean, I worked a grind. And the number of times people would say, "Oh my God, think of how many hours, like you're here all the time, you're being overworked." And my answer to that was, there's somebody right now that's working an overnight janitorial job and then a morning bus service job and then waiting tables in the afternoon and then going and doing a janitorial thing. They're working 4 different jobs a day just to make ends meet. I think to me, we all have to remember that wherever we are in life, there's somebody that is scratching and clawing to get to the spot that we're at. And so there is this moment of, instead of always looking for help, which is, I think, the nature of the beast of society right now, also remember that you need to look to help. And that's just, it only takes responding. I can't tell you how many times I would send an email or a demo or a song or my reel in sports to somebody, and I would say, "Oh man, I hope you give it a listen." And then, 3 months later, it's like, "Hey, just circling back." It's just a reminder that there's somebody that's waiting for us to circle back and help them too. I believe in the power of that spider web.
I do too. And I think it's really It's really powerful when you see it that way. One of my guests had a thing where he gave marbles to people, and it was like a little token of he wanted to give them something, and the way that teeny weeny little thing could make somebody smile, it just goes to show how hungry I think our whole society is for any level of that connection. And the olive branch doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be life changing. It can be a very small thing. So as we've talked, Jason, I really think that something that seems very unrelatable for people is how unreal life maybe feels and has been for you. And obviously we've just talked through like you worked hard. Like this is not something that came easy. But for good or bad, I'm curious, what is an unreal moment that you've encountered that has shaped who you've become?
Man, I think, God, that's a great question. And I will go to, I think, the most recent, hardship for me. I hadn't taken a vacation in years. I was 6 months removed from signing a brand new contract at ESPN. Contracts in at ESPN, for anyone that follows and watches these things, they're fully guaranteed. So once you sign a contract, you're paid through the end of that contract, no matter what. And so the ESPN layoffs that happened a couple of years ago were less than 6 months after I'd signed a new 2-year contract. I was on a flight headed to Denver to a Comic Con where I was going to meet Chevy Chase. My first vacation I'd taken in at least 4 years. My first time getting away, and we were leaving, we were on the jet, like, the plane was departing when my boss called from radio, and I sent her to voicemail, and she sent me a text and said, "You have to call me right now." And so as the plane was leaving the runway, I called and she said, "I'm sorry." And she was in tears. She said, "I'm sorry, I have to tell you this, but you've been cut. So, I know you're leaving town for the weekend, 4th of July weekend. I know you're leaving town, but as soon as you get back, you're going to need to clear everything away from your desk area, and your services aren't going to be needed." Now, the ESPN did give me the option, so I went to work right away. Like I said earlier, you're never prepared for the New York Post putting your name in the paper saying, "Hey, he just got fired from ESPN." But, the beautiful thing is that the CEO of Yahoo Sports is somebody that had brought me on to ESPN when I first got there. He loved me and he sent me a text. It was less than an hour in, and I knew I was going to get to keep working. I had to choose. There was some legalese to get out of the contract and be able to continue working. But the funny thing is, to me, everybody kept talking about how angry all of us should be. And I put up a social media post. I waited a couple of days. I put up a social media post a couple of days later, and I just, like, honestly, I didn't even think that much about it, Ty. I just put up a post, and I was honest with the world. I said, "Look, everybody keeps talking for me and for everybody. I just wanna say you're wrong. Like, I'm so thankful. ESPN changed my life. Like, I never would have gotten to Yahoo if I didn't have the ESPN name on my resume. Like, I'm able to walk into rooms now in sports I never would have been able to because ESPN gave me platform over and over and over again. I got to host SportsCenter on Snapchat for 3.5 million kids all the time. Like, I still can be out in the streets and people will say, "Hey, I missed you on Snapchat." Like, it's crazy to me the amount of impact that ESPN allowed me to have. So I went in with a total servant's heart and just wanted to be honest about grace and thanks, because to me, no matter what happens, like, nothing changes the chapter I just had. And the funny thing is that tweet, I mean, it was probably the most viral thing I've ever posted, well over 1 million views. All of the media outlets picked it up, and it's funny because I didn't yell and I didn't scream, and to this day, anyone that's consumed the work that I've done from then, like, the number of times I do interviews and people wanna bait me on saying something about terrible about ESPN, and it's not my nature. They changed my life. Like, people wanna find terrible things for me to say about the band Perry because we parted ways. I never, like, they changed my life. So it's just funny to me that by being myself in my darkest moment, I think that's just the one thing, like, I just lean on gratitude somehow, some way, and, like, my life has been hard for a lot of it, and I've always looked at that and said, "You know what? For as hard as my family life might have been growing up, for as hard as my childhood was, for as hard as my family life is now in many ways, it doesn't matter because I get this, I have the glory, like, I've been fan supported my entire adult life. Fans have chosen to consume my work, and if I can't find gratitude in that, man, what am I doing it for?" So I don't know. I think my parents always went to the darkest path in any sort of catastrophe. They always took the darkest side. I was just natured to do the opposite. So to your point, in what should have been the darkest moment of my adult life, I think it turned into the most beautiful blessing. I've never been happier at Yahoo. I've never been treated better than I am at Yahoo. And it's just a reminder that, like, no, the platform's not as big, and I have to explain to people, "Yes, I work at Yahoo, you can find it out here." Like, I get that it's different, but, man, again, I didn't care about being famous. I care about getting to work and having people like my work and having people care about my work, and I have that better than ever now. So, through darkness comes light.
It is so powerful, and it's such a study in something that Trent Shelton says about perspective being your power or your prison. And, when you talk through that story, I hear that gratitude, the lens of gratitude changes your perspective and makes things be a power instead of a prison and helped you realize in real time how something terrible on the outside was actually happening for you, not to you. And that is a whole mindset shift that I think, like I say, it's grounded in gratitude. So that is a concept that's very near and dear to my heart. I believe in finding things to be grateful for in our darkest moments because it's very special to me. And I'll share a story as briefly as I can, because I had a parenting moment the other day that's worth sharing. So I seek to find joy wherever I go, and I do a little series on TikTok where I do, like, joy from the ground up, I call it, and I usually put my phone on the ground and pick it up, and then I ask, like, "Hello, you, what are you stop right now and tell me something you're grateful for," because that shifts where you're at in your head that day. Well, my family was having a very hard day. We've been working through a very hard season in my family right now, and my husband was just dark, and it was he had a challenging conversation with his parents on Tuesday, and, parents getting older is hard for everybody, and that was kind of what was going on, and I had my own kind of hard day, and my dear 12-year-old son now I'm gonna get emotional, but my dear 12-year-old son stops the conversation. He's like, "Guys, guys, guys, what are we grateful for today? Dad, what's something good that happened to you today?" And my heart just, like, overflowed because it was the coolest moment where it can change and it can shift that energy from being so heavy. It just, like, lightens the load on, and we all need that right now. Like, in what I think of this image that I keep seeing. It's various different creators keep sharing it, of these people walking on a street, and they all have, like, words above their head, like, lost their job or their parent died or whatever, and it's just so powerful because we all have something going on. Like, everybody has something, and we benefit by sharing grace and feeling gratitude, even when, especially when things are so hard, because that light then shares with others and brightens the world around us. It's just so cool. So seeing how that's come to life for you is beautiful, and I'm grateful for you sharing, honestly, how, the importance and the very real way that gratitude can shape and transform your day, but also your life.
Well, and to stack on as you say that, it's one really I've always been really transparent on air because I think when you're on air, one of the powerful things that you get is the ability to connect with people in a very real way. I've never hidden the fact that I have no relationship with my family anymore, my brother or my parents. I don't have any family essentially, and that was a choice. That's something I went through a lot of therapy. I worked really hard to get to the point that I was able to separate from them. I'm really proud of that. But the funny thing is, so many people would look at that as a darkness that they can't talk about. I've talked about it openly, and the number of times that I've talked about it openly on national radio shows and afterwards gotten DMs and comments from people that are like, "Oh my god, how did you do it? This is incredible. Thank you for saying this. I felt like such a pariah. I felt like such an outlier. I've dealt with all of these things, and I can't find a way to separate all of these." And it's funny how even embracing some of the things that just feel mucky and being honest about it and real about it has created real benefit for people. So again, even I'm not saying that I have gratitude that I have no relationship with my parents, but I have gratitude that I worked really hard to do it the right way in a way that I'm comfortable talking about it because it has genuinely helped people that have taken the time to reach out to me. And so it's been crazy cool for many, like weirdly, like the number of times I posted on Mother's Day or Father's Day, things like that. Hey, just shout out to everybody that doesn't have a relationship with their mom or their dad today. And it's really tough. And everybody's telling you you should reconcile. I just want you to know you're not alone. And being able to embrace sort of even my own darkness, it's not something I'd wish on anybody, but it's brought other people tremendous comfort. So I say that because Ty, there's so much just power in embracing all of who we are and doing it from the right. I don't know, doing it from a perspective of love and growth just makes a difference.
What is something that you do to stay grounded and present in the moment? Because with how not again, nonlinear is the word that keeps coming into my head, but with how nonlinear your journey has been, there's you've paid attention, and that has helped lead you and guide you. So that the first thing is, what do you do to stay grounded? But then beyond that, like if you had a megaphone to tell something to the world right now on how to be present and to be still, what would you say?
I think for me, I can look back at my music career and say that the biggest fault and the reason that I fell out of love with the music I made is I was so worried about what was coming next that I stopped appreciating where we were. And, I remember getting off the plane and having to rush to Hyde Park in London. I remember that show specifically because it was 110,000 people. And as I jumped off the stage at the end to get back in the van, I remember looking at somebody and saying, like, where are we going next? And it was just everything. The year that we won Vocal Group of the Year for the ACM Awards, at the dinner afterwards, I remember standing up and saying, "All right, how are we winning it next year?" And everything became so much about how are we running this back that I never appreciated it. So when I got into sports, my one rule was that I was not going to let the chase eliminate the joy. And for me, that means every time I'm somewhere, and it doesn't matter, I've been lucky enough to stand on the field for several national championship games. And every time I do that in college football, I stop and I grab a couple of blades of grass and I just press pause on everything and I soak it in and I take a picture because I hate taking pictures. So I take a picture so that I can force myself to look back on it, right? Like, the number of times that I have found myself at sporting events in the last, especially the last few years with Yahoo, where they've sent me to the Natty and to the Final Four and to Super Bowls, and like we'll be at the Super Bowl in San Francisco next week for a week, and so often my mindset has been, all right, let's dial in. We're here for work, and one thing I just force myself to do when I'm in a position everybody else would absolutely give anything to be at, I take a minute and I just force myself every day to take a minute and to pause and to soak it in. And it doesn't have to be anything deep. You just have to be thankful for where you are because if you get so consumed with the chase of where you're going, then none of it was worth it. And I think that's the big megaphone is every single person watching this can relate to the fact that in high school, all you wanted to do was get out of high school. And then you got to college and you were like, oh man, I wish I was back in high school. Like I missed that. And then you get out of college and you're like, oh, I wish I was back in college. And then you get your first job where you're not really making any money, but you're having a blast and like it lasts for a few minutes. And then years later, you're looking back saying, I wish I was back to that moment when life was simpler. We constantly look back at the chapters we were in, even the way we look at ourselves in the mirror physically. The number of times it's like, oh, I was in better shape 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, you thought you were in better shape 2 years ago. So like we're constantly looking the wrong way. And to me, like if we're constantly looking back with envy, I feel like at some point you have to look back with grace and gratitude, and then you have to stay where you are. I genuinely no longer in my life worry about where I'm going. And I would yell to everybody, like when the first time we got any sort of an inkling that I might get an ESPN contract, I remember somebody said, well, would you move to Connecticut? You've lived in Nashville for 20 years. Would you move to Connecticut? And my answer was, I'm not thinking about that. I'm not going to worry today about whether or not this contract has me in Nashville or Connecticut. And guess what? That contract turned out and said, by the way, you have to move to Connecticut and you have 30 days to make it happen. That was a nightmare. But the thing of it is, you're going to live through the nightmare scenario either way. If that's what's coming, worrying about it in advance ain't going to help. So to me, what I've really focused on, what I tell everybody is like, look back with grace, learn your lessons from the past for sure. Honor the past. I think it's important to do all of those things, but you can't get so consumed with where you've been or where you're going that you forget where you are right now. And as simple as that sounds, Man, it's the hardest thing in the world to do. It is the hardest thing in the world to shut off everything in your mind because our minds want to take us to, well, what's that mean for next year? And what, for you with kids, like, how do you appreciate the moment now instead of worried, well, what about college? Like, and then how are we going to figure these things out? It just, and then what happens? Like, we've seen just so much darkness in the world in the last 5, 10 years. If there's anything we should learn is that we don't know where we're going. And I think COVID, that's where the COVID era really changed everything for me because I realized that we don't control anything. So if you don't control anything, then worry about what you can control, which is the right now. How do you make it through today and make today the best day that you could possibly make it? I think there's truth to that, and it's hard to do, and it takes discipline to do. But man, I work at it every day. I'm not always successful, but I really try every day.
Something that might help, and it may be something you do anyway, but when you talked about how to stay grounded and pause, it made me think about, like, do you have a song or an album that helps bring you back to the present moment?
So it's so interesting. Peek behind the curtain. I knew you were going to ask me this, and I am a musician, and I want to peek behind the curtain because, like, you'll think this is the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life. I go to the gym every day. Right now, I'm on this fitness journey. It's something I'm really committed to making sure that when I'm 70, I'm as mobile and as dynamic as I can be. So I'm committing today to the gym every day. Can I sign my name to it? It's a big deal for me. My trainer, yeah, I know it sounds terrible when I say he's on an app, okay, so he's not with me every day. But my trainer said, "You gotta put together a playlist." Music distracts me from so much because I'm so invested in it that when I work out every day, I'm in the gym between cardio and lifting about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, every day. I listen to old episodes of Law& and Order that I've seen a million times because I don't wanna get too low or too high. When I was a kid, the songs that touched my soul, even then, were songs like "Turn the Page" and "Homeward Bound," Simon& and Garfunkel. Like, I always loved angsty on the road songs, which is weird considering that later became my life. There are songs I connect to. There are songs that I think that sort of always make me feel. Dream On, Aerosmith. Dream On always makes me feel, and it ties me back to the first time I ever heard that song. It was on MTV, it was a live performance with an orchestra, and it was right in that same chapter where I was like, "God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen." But to me, like, the music I listen to the most is sad boy pop. It's, sad singer-songwriter, angsty stuff. I wanna make sure that music helps me emote things, and I think because when I was a kid, playing the violin was an escape from a very violent household, so for me, like, I took my aggression and my anger, like, I was a great aggressive classical music violinist. I was a great aggressive fiddle player. I was not a great dainty anything with the violin, like, I'm not working through joy with it, no, I'm out there hammering. How much can I press into it? So I think for me, the music that keeps me grounded, weirdly, is the music that allows me the freedom to just be sad and get it out and have a bad day and get it out because I think sometimes just working through that makes me better the next day. So it's not that it pumps me up or it's not that it brings me back to center. It's that sometimes I need to listen to a James Arthur, British singer-songwriter album full of sad songs and just get my feels for a night. And the next day I'm recharged and I'm back to the best version of myself.
Wow. I don't know where to go with that because the turn the page you're talking, is that, Bob
Bob
Seger?
Seger, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Bob Seger. All about being alone on the road and nobody understands you. As a
Mm.
ten-year-old kid, I loved being on the road. Well, I think again, nobody in my family was musical, right? My parents and my brother were very like it was a very violent household. That's not who I am. So I think songs about being on the road were really about songs about feeling lost and disconnected to any connectivity of reality. And that was me, like Simon and Garfunkel, Homeward Bound, is about longing for some place where you can call home and you can belong. And even as a kid that's 10, 11 years old, that's the stuff I resonated with because I didn't really feel connected to anything as weird as that sounds. So music was my connection. So yeah, it's very ethereal, I guess. I don't know. It's very heady.
Well, a lot of the things that you've said speak to my soul, and Turn the Page was my dad's favorite song. And my dad passed away when I was 23. And that song has the most special place in my heart. So the fact that you threw that out there right away was just like a moment where, I'm just feeling very grateful because I feel like, you know, dad's here with us, and how cool is that? Like, I just feel very grateful for that. So thank you for that particular song and that moment. And I don't even care about all of the crying that's happening here today because there's so much good. There's so much good happening along with it. So I am so grateful. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, like for hours and hours and hours. I don't know if we can keep everybody with us for hours, but I'd love to talk to you for hours. But I have a few more questions that are more of like a quick hitting, a sentence or two kind of questions if you're ready for that. Let's go. Indeed. So, what is something about this season of your life that you don't want to forget?
Mm, uh, I think that's a great question. I don't want to forget the magic of launching something new. Like Yahoo Sports Daily is my daily show with Yahoo, 9 to 11 a.m. It was launched in August with me and my co-host Caroline Fenton as a brand new undertaking. Nobody's ever done anything quite like what we're doing. It's a TV show that's on the internet. It's all of these different things, and it's a whole cast of people that I'm so lucky to get to work with. It's rare in life that you can write brand new chapters. So for me, embracing what it means to just be writing a book from scratch is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you for that. So, what part of yourself are you grateful that you've never let go of?
My emotions, right? I'm grateful for the fact that I'm a movie crier. I'm grateful for the fact that I'm a podcast crier. Apparently, never have been before. But I don't think you can truly connect with anybody if you're not willing to connect with anybody. And I have been for my entire life. So I think the music that I grew up around has created somebody that's willing to be emotional and vulnerable. And that doesn't mean you're soft, and it doesn't mean any of those other things. So I'm incredibly grateful, and weirdly, I don't quick answer, but weirdly, I'm incredibly grateful that my childhood was not easy. Like, I think for me, being a fat kid that played the violin, got bullied a lot, violent household, all of these things at once, what it taught me is how to find, like, strength in myself, and it taught me, how to find people that I can connect with and find connecting points with people all over the place. So, in a world where we're constantly trying to insulate people from hardship, I think the hardship of my childhood is one of the most beautiful things about my adulthood.
I know I said quick hitting too, and I'm breaking my own rule, but that goes back right back to that whole gift of struggle and how struggle shapes us into who we are truly. And some of the people that have had the most hardship in their lives and the most challenge are the most grateful humans. And we could learn so much from them. So I'm with you on that. If someone listening feels pressure to choose just one version of themselves and stick to it, what would you tell them?
Wow. I That's nobody's decision to make for you. Like, you can't live for anybody else. And I mean I think one of the most empowering things of the modern generation is we figured out that that means anybody. Like, I'm not going to live my life for what anybody else tells me to live my life. Now, I think when you have love and when you have family and when you have certain people, like that should weigh into your decision, but it should weigh into your decision because at the end of the day, like if I end up, an old broke dude that's just working at Walmart trying to make a living, I'm okay with that because I'm gonna have great stories and I'm gonna live the life that I really wanted to live. You have to have peace with yourself, and so much of even growing with a partner is like you grow and they grow, and how do you guys grow together? So often you lose yourself in that. That's the one thing, and it's nobody else's decision for how you're gonna live. I think when you are a good person and when you have love in your heart, you factor in other people's feelings to the decisions you make, but your decisions are still yours to make, and it is nobody's world to tell you how to make them.
Amen. Thank you for that. Quick before you forget, what matters most to you right now?
The two things that have always mattered most to me are impact, always, and respect. And when I say respect, I mean respect from people that I think should know. I don't care what somebody on Twitter has to say about a show I did. I don't care. I never cared what a reviewer that had never played a musical instrument had to say about one of my concerts. I cared about when we walked off stage, and we were opening for Keith Urban, and Keith Urban walked up to me afterwards and said, "You are a badass fiddle player." That to me, that mattered because Keith knows, right? And To me, that's the thing. Like when I was laid off from ESPN, the most powerful thing is I got to live my funeral while I was alive. The number of texts I got from some of the biggest names in sports media, people I didn't even realize I was that level of friend with, that wanted to make sure that I knew how much I meant to them and how much they respect my work. That's what matters to me. I don't care about what, the average Joe Schmo thinks. I care about making impact to the average Joe Schmo. I care about respect from people that I think have the knowledge to know whether or not I'm good or bad at what I do, or who I am.
I am so grateful for you. I am so grateful for your stories and for your sharing your journey with us today. I have no words, honestly, and I don't get speechless often. I'm a talker. I've always been told I'm too wordy, but I don't really have words for how perfect this journey was. Thank you for taking us on it. And I want to ask before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share that I didn't ask?
No, I don't think so. I'm sorry. You did such a beautiful interview. It was such a this was such a beautiful opportunity to talk to you. I would just one more time impart to everybody that you can get so bogged down with the whys and the hows and the details and the minutia. Find whatever your piece is, whatever the thing is that allows you to escape for 10 minutes. If it's meditation, if it's going to the gym, if it's just sitting there, in a dark, silent room, I don't care. Find 10 minutes and shut off the noise, and you might find truth. Because I think so often truth is clouded by everything we think we need to be, and everybody we think we need to please, and everything we think we should be doing. When sometimes the truest path is the clearest one, and you know it in your heart of hearts, you just find obstacles to not listen to it. So find a way to reduce the obstacles. I think you find more clarity on where your true peace comes from.
Where can people find you? Because they're going to want more Jason Fitz in their life after this.
Well, that's kind of you to say. Social media at Jason Fitz is on Instagram and on Twitter, X, and Yahoo Sports. We're there every single day, Monday through Friday. We're there. I'm all over Yahoo Sports. You can check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your free TV, like Roku and Tubi and everything. Yahoo Sports has a channel there, or yahoosports.tv is a way you can watch the shows we do. But yeah, I'm all over Yahoo there and all over Fox Sports Radio.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for your time, for your energy, for your wisdom, and just for being you today. I'm very, very grateful. And we'll see you next time on Quick Before You Forget. Thank you for being with me today on Quick Before You Forget. Please take a second to like, share, subscribe, and rate the show, as it's super helpful for me if you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll see you next time on Quick Before You Forget.